And Amy, do you think you've seen any transition in your relationship with your editor on the historical picture books? Now you've done 3 together now?
Oh, Tamar?
Yeah.
Yeah. She, I think, wow, I love her. I feel like I said, I feel like she gets me. And the older I get, the more esoteric my stories get. My poor agent, like I send her stories and she's like, oh, I don't know if I can sell this. And I say, send it to Tamar, send it to Tamar. I don't care if you send it to anyone else. Just send it to Tamar. And if Tamar doesn't like it, I will put it in a drawer and call it a day. So that actually is happening as we speak. She's sending a story to her this week that the first pass I did that I sent to Karen, she's like, no, you need to revise this. So I did, and I sent it back. I think I changed maybe 2 words. And like my idea of revision is very subtle. And she said, "Oh, this is better." And so I was like, "Okay." So she sent it off. So yeah, Tamar's. I love that about her. I feel like if she either with a story we send to her, she either like really loves it and is like, "Yes, I love this," or she's like, "No, it doesn't work for me." There's no in between with Tamar, and that's good. It's we don't waste any time.
That is great. I think that when I was a much younger editor that I had a hard time doing that. I think that I dragged along too many people for much too long. So that's an appreciated quality for an editor, just to be able to make relatively quick decisions like that, I think.
For sure.
Any nuggets of sort of good things or tips or something that you've learned as an author from your, and this is for both of you, as an author from your editors that has sort of helped you as a writer?
I think with me, the thing that comes back, across several editors is usually that it's not usually a language problem. It's usually that I don't make it tough enough. And I've learned that. I've learned before I send it off to go, well, wait a minute, is this, you really made it hard enough? And I, as my writers who are like, who are on here somewhere know, that's something I say all the time is, have you made it hard enough? Have you made it hard enough? So, but that's the biggest thing for me is learning how to put the tension into the story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say for me, my lesson is always about remembering audience. I tend to write fairly, again, esoteric, sophisticated. I'm writing, at the level of something that I would want to read, and I have to remember that I'm not the main audience here. So that's always a good lesson for me, and that's always something that comes through from my editors to keep that in mind, and my agent, like to kind of tone it down, not dumb it down, not make it more simplistic or anything like that, but just to keep the language and the story in mind in terms of the reader, and not necessarily the writer.
And sort of the flip side, because that's sort of something you learn as an editor that's probably informing you as an author. What about, is there anything that being an author has helped both of you in your editorial work? So if you're working with another, or let's say, with Goosebottom Books, as you were working with other authors, being an author, what has that helped you be how has it helped you be a better editor?
I don't think I learned a lot from being an author. I actually think that being an editor greatly improves my writing. I'm not so sure that being an author greatly improves my editing. I think that it's that an editor's hat, for example, Summer, you're an editor, you're not an author. It wouldn't make me think for a minute that you don't edit just as well as editors who are authors. I don't know that I believe that there's anything incremental to be had in the actual editing work. if you're probably wiser than I am, you might learn a little bit more patience, you know, to how to soften some of the blows. But I have a reputation as a tough editor, and that's just me. You know, I was brought up by a really tough mom, so I kind of learn it from the breast. But yeah. So I, to be honest, I can't honestly say that it greatly informs the way I edit. Amy, what about you?
Oh boy. This was another question that I was asked recently, like, do I consider myself an author who edits or an editor who writes? And I'm a writer first and foremost. I mean, that's how I started out. You know, I've been writing since I could write, and studied that in school. And if I had to choose, which I hope I never have to, I would have to go with writing. That's just where my heart is. But I love editing. Editing to me is so much fun, and it's a different muscle in my brain. And I think the things that inform my work as a writer, just like going deep and finding sort of the emotion of something and the meaning of something, is what I bring to my editing. I'm always pushing my authors to go deeper and to find that meaning in a story, and I want to feel something when I'm reading a story. And so I would say that's where my authoring comes into play with my editing. I'm not, one thing I'm learning, and I'm, 25 years in here, I don't know if I'll ever learn this, but I hope I'm getting better. And that is drawing the line between editing and rewriting. I mean, there's times where I feel like I need to pull back because I'm putting too much of myself into this story, and it's not my story. And that's a hard lesson to learn, and it's something I'm still working on, is to allow others to be the authors of their stories, and to step back and to really remember my editor hat and put the author hat aside.
I think that's one thing that editors, as they are young and learning and getting into editorial work, that is one of the first things that I think they do have to learn, is that the work is not theirs. I mean, I certainly did have to go through it and realize where that line is, that, you're there to ask the right questions so that the authors can answer those questions, right, to the best of their ability. And I do find, and have found, that there are two camps of editors, the ones that write and the ones that don't. And you're right, Sharon, I am definitely one of the ones that don't. To my mother's chagrin, she constantly asks me when I'm going to publish my own book, and I said, I'm behind a lot of other ones, but not my own. Okay, we've got a couple more minutes to have conversation, but we will be opening up to questions, everyone. So think about them, and then we'll have everyone start raising hands in a couple minutes here. We've answered that. So can we talk about a little bit, just sort of briefly, about how each of you took your first step into the children's book world? I mean, obviously, Amy, you mentioned that you, being a writer brought you into this. And Sharon, you stepped into it first as an author. I guess how did you end up having both hats, both of you, both author and editor, and how did that sort of come about? I guess, Sharon, let's start with you.
Okay, so for me, I had been a professional writer for a very long time. I was first a copywriter in advertising. Before that, a journalist, and then a copywriter in advertising. And then I went from being a copywriter to being a creative director, which basically means that everything that walks out of the shop gets your approval. So that takes you kind of across the border between the words and the art. And then then I kind of did a little bit like what the French lady did. And I went traveling. I went backpacking for 2 years. And while I was backpacking, I was writing, and I didn't really have an agenda to publish. And at the time, I was also writing short stories for adults, and thought of myself as a short form writer. Didn't really thought of myself as a short story writer. And these children's books were just something that kind of came up on the side. But even with the short stories, never really thought very much about publishing them. And then, someone said to me, well, you already have it. You might, I might as well send it out and see what the market thinks of it. And these started off as short stories children's stories that I was writing while I was traveling. So I'd spent some time in Borneo and was really fascinated by the Iban culture there. Have always been a historical geek. So went and did my little research, got even more fascinated, wrote a book about, as I said, a child who actually misses the days, or thinks he misses the days of headhunting, because he finds longhouse life so incredibly boring now. They stopped headhunting, they just turned into a bunch of farmers and fishermen. But the Iban actually dance out their stories. It's like interwoven into their dance culture. So he gets to see his grandfather dance out all these stories about when they were fierce warriors who went and took heads, and he regrets that those days are over. And the story takes off from there. And there's another one that became The Umbrella Queen, that was published by HarperCollins, which was inspired by a village in Thailand where everybody paints umbrellas exactly the same way. And I'm a painter myself, so I thought, God, what would it be like to grow up in this culture where you're expected to paint exactly what the village pattern is. So that was the genesis of another children's book. So I had these stories, and I did some research, and I narrowed it down to six publishers that said they were looking for multicultural work. And so I sent them my headhunting story, and Amy sent me quite quickly an email saying, I got it, and I really enjoyed it. I don't think we would be ever brave enough to publish it. So is there anything else that you've got? So that's what started it. And that got me, Amy ended up buying Ruby's Wish. That got me into the writing world. I had a bit of a charmed entry because Ruby's Wish did phenomenally well. So much so that that I believe her name was Chris, the publicist, kept saying to me, "This is your first book, so you don't know that this is really unusual." And I kind of tried to keep that in mind, but it wasn't until all the other books that I thought, wow, that was really unusual. So after that, you fast forward a few years, and I wanted to write about real princesses, being a history nerd. And nobody, and now I know why, but I kept getting told, well, we'll do one, and if it works, we'll do another one, right? And I thought, well, but that gives a completely different message. For one princess to appear at a time says, oh, there was this very unusual person who did something. But if you bring out 6 at a time, it says that girls have done it. They've always done it. They've done it all over the world. They've done it in every culture. They've just done it. So I wanted the 6 books, and Amy had just left Chronicle and was freelancing, and I was off on another one of my travel jags, and I said to her, I want to do this. I think I want to publish them. I have no idea. Don't know very much about publishing. I know a lot about production because of my time as a creative director. I can get the team together. I can get it illustrated, get it designed. I know all about print production. I'm very proud of the fact that I went on a press check and called the pressman because we were up at 98% black instead of 100. Geeky things like that. But I don't know anything about publishing. And will you help me? And Amy said, sure. I'll work in as a consultant and as your editor. And we started from there.